A Soviet UFO crash with photo and video evidence, possible photographic evidence that Amelia Earhart survived her plane crash, pyramids on the moon, and more. These are strange historical photos that they tried to bury. So in 1969, reports started coming out about a supposed UFO crash in Russia, and this footage here was used in news reports at the time. Here we can see what is allegedly KGB and military personnel inspecting a disc-shaped object at a crash site. These images were later featured in the secret KGB UFO files, a documentary that brought a lot of attention to this incident. Some think that this footage and photographs are evidence of a genuine UFO, that the Soviet government recovered a crashed alien spacecraft. But it's never been proven. There's no definitive documentation of this case, so some think the whole thing was just a hoax. And yeah, it's hard to find solid information on this incident, but for some, that just makes the whole thing more believable. The Soviets weren't really known for being transparent about these things, and it's not hard to imagine they'd want to cover something like this up. To date though, no conclusive evidence has confirmed the authenticity of this footage or the photos. Is this a hoax, or are these images real, but were just suppressed? In 2017, a photograph started getting shared around that some believe showed Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, on a dock in the Marshall Islands after their disappearance in 1937. The image found in the US National Archives is supposedly a piece of proof that Earhart and Noonan survived a crash landing and were then taken captive by the Japanese military. Sean Henry, a former executive assistant director for the FBI, has analyzed the image and confirmed that it hasn't been altered or tampered with in any way. Earhart disappeared on July 2nd of 1937 during her attempt to fly around the world. 2 years later, she was officially declared dead. They figured her plane crashed somewhere in the Pacific, but if this photo is legit, it could mean she survived, at least for a while. The woman in the image does kind of look like Earhart, although it is a bit grainy and shot from a distance, and the man has a receding hairline, similar facial features to Noonan. I could see it. In the background, there's also a Japanese ship, the Koshu, towing a barge that happens to be about the same length as Earhart's plane. During NASA's Apollo 17 mission in 1972, astronauts snapped a bunch of photos while exploring the moon. One of those pictures, known as AS17135-20-680, has caught a lot of attention because it seems to show a pyramid-shaped structure on the lunar surface. But what makes it even more suspicious is that NASA later blurred or altered the image in official archives. This has led some to believe they were trying to cover something up, that maybe this image is proof that they found something up there. Others argue it's just a natural rock formation, and what looks like a pyramid is really just the way the light and shadows hit the surface. You know the deal. NASA hasn't officially explained what's in the photo, which is only added fuel to the fire, at least online. Without a clear answer, people have come up with all kinds of theories, ranging from secret space programs to lost alien ruins. Whatever the truth is, the image is still one of the more mysterious photos taken during the Apollo missions, and to this day, it still has people debating what's really up there. On November 22nd, 1963, during the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, numerous photographs and films were taken by spectators. Well, someone showed up in some of these photos and footage, a mysterious figure who would later be dubbed the Babushka Lady. She wore a headscarf and was standing in a pretty prime spot where she would have seen everything go down. But alright, whatever, lots of people were there. Obviously they're gonna be captured on camera. Well, what makes the Babushka Lady so interesting is that she's holding what looks like a camera, meaning she might have captured one of the clearest angles of the incident. Thing is, nobody knows who she was, and whatever footage she might have taken has never been found. The FBI even put out calls for her to come forward, but she never did. Some people think she was just a random bystander, but others actually think she may have had a reason for staying quiet. JFK conspiracies are a rabbit hole, but there are some that say the CIA wanted him dead, and if that's the case, they wouldn't have wanted any images leaking that could potentially incriminate them. Maybe the Babushka Lady and her photos were found, if you know what I mean. Either way, she's still one of the biggest unanswered questions from that day. The Black Knight satellite is a term used to describe a mysterious object believed by some to be an extraterrestrial satellite orbiting Earth. The legend dates back to 1899, when inventor Nikola Tesla reported receiving these unusual radio signals, which he speculated could have been coming from some kind of intelligent source. In 1954, newspapers reported claims by UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe that the US Air Force had detected 2 satellites orbiting Earth, at a time when no known satellites had been launched. Then in 1998, during the STS-88 mission, NASA's first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour snapped this incredible photo. What we see here is this strange object in orbit, which some claimed to be photographic evidence of the legendary Black Knight satellite. NASA later came out and said that the object was a thermal blanket lost during a spacewalk, but even still, the Black Knight satellite is a popular conspiracy, and some are still adamant that there's some ancient alien probe monitoring Earth, floating around up there, watching our every move. Horatio Gordon Robley was a British soldier. He was also a collector of something most people today would consider pretty horrifying. During his time in New Zealand, he became obsessed with mokomakai, the preserved tattooed heads of Maori people. Originally, these heads had deep cultural and spiritual meaning, but by the late 1800s, they'd become novelty items to trade and collect, especially with European colonials, who saw them more as circus sideshow type items rather than sacred objects. So in this photo from 1895, Robley sits proudly in front of dozens of these preserved heads mounted on a wall, like some kind of grotesque art exhibit. Some of the heads had belonged to fallen warriors, some were taken from slaves. And sure, the image is disturbing, being that it's a guy with a pretty morbid hobby, but it also perfectly encapsulates how colonials viewed indigenous culture. Instead of respect or understanding, these remains were displayed like souvenirs. In 1918, the Russian Revolution was in full swing, and the Bolsheviks had one last loose end to tie up: Romanovs. Tsar Nicholas II, along with his wife Alexandra, family, and a few loyal staff members were all being held at a house that would become the site of one of the most morbid executions in the country's history. Early in the morning, on July 17th, they were taken to the basement and they never came out. It was brutal, to say the least. Some survived the first round of fire thanks to the jewels sewn into their clothes, but they were finished off afterwards with the spikes on the men's bayonets. This photo shows what the room looked like after the bodies were cleared out. Katharina Datzel was locked away in a German psychiatric hospital in the early 1900s. There's not much known about her diagnosis or how she ended up there, but one thing survived: a photo of her standing next to a life-sized figure that she made out of straw and bits of bedding. It's pretty eerie. She reportedly built the straw man as a form of protest. Some accounts say it was meant to represent the Kaiser, and she attacked it out of frustration and rage. Whether that's true or not, the image itself is disturbing even without the context. And it's not just the straw figure, it's what it came out of. Isolation, powerlessness, a person making something just to have someone or something to direct their anger at. Alright, well, this has been pretty heavy. Let's talk about McDonald's. A different kind of heavy. A heavy in the bowel region. Are you scared of clowns? Even now, some people find Ronald McDonald kinda off-putting, but the first Ronald McDonald wasn't the bright, bouncy clown we know today. Is Ronald McDonald even around? I actually haven't seen him in a long time. Anyway, he looked like this, the first one. Played by Willard Scott, the original Ronald wore a paper cup for a nose, a tray of food as a hat, and just had a more haphazard, thrown together kind of look in general. Makes him slightly more unsettling in my opinion. There's a photo of him grinning directly into the camera holding a burger, looking more like something an AI would spit out if you typed in nasty fast food clown man. This version of Ronald was part of a local TV promotion in Washington, D.C., and it was thrown together pretty fast, as you can probably tell. Fitting though, for McDonald's, fast is kind of their whole thing. Scott had previously played Bozo the Clown, an equally creepy clown. When McDonald's wanted a similar character, he basically slapped some fast food on his head and improvised. And the result was a mascot that kind of looked like he might offer you fries with one hand and then drag you into the sewer with the other. Anyway, McDonald's rebranded Ronald soon after, giving him a full makeover to be more, acceptable for human society. This is Hamida Jandoubi, a convicted killer on his way to his death. He was the last man to be executed by guillotine in France, 1977. Yes, 77. The same year, audiences were flocking to the theater to watch ships fly around in space. As a farm boy learned to wield a lightsaber and harness the power of the Force, folks in France were watching a man's head get lobbed off in the town square. It wasn't actually quite like that. It was not a public beheading, but still, that is pretty bonkers. This photo shows Robert Falcon Scott and his team standing at the South Pole, finally reaching their goal after weeks of brutal conditions. They are clearly worn down, frostbitten, starving, and emotionally wrecked. But the worst part, when they got there, they realized they weren't even the first. The Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, had beaten them by over a month. The disappointment in their faces is unmistakable. It's more than disappointment, really. This was the realization that all the pain, the danger, it had all been for second place. And things only got worse from there. The trek back was hell. Edgar Evans was the first to die, likely from a mix of injuries and exhaustion. Then Lawrence Oates suffered from frostbite, and knowing he was slowing the others down, he just walked off into a blizzard to die on his own terms. Scott, Wilson, and Bowers pushed on, but a storm eventually trapped them inside their tent. For 9 straight days, they were stuck, freezing and starving, just 11 miles from the supply depot that could have saved them. All 3 died in that tent. This photo was taken just after the liberation of France in World War II. The woman in the picture is Simone Toussaint being paraded through the streets of Chartres, France. Her head had been shaved, her clothes were torn, and a mark had been branded on her forehead. She's holding her infant, who is fathered by a German soldier. This was not rare. Scenes like this happened across France during what was called the Wild Purge. Thousands of women were accused and punished for sleeping with the enemy. There were no trials, it was really just mob justice. And in many cases, women weren't even collaborating. Some were just accused. Others worked as like maids for them, or had been victims of SA at the hands of German soldiers. But that didn't matter. Crowds gathered, cheered, and sometimes jeered as these women were marched through towns, sometimes barefoot, bleeding and crying. And this was seen as justice at the time, but it was really more like revenge theater. After the US dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the heat blast was so intense it bleached surfaces. Anything that blocked the light, including human bodies, they left a sort of reverse shadow behind. One of the most haunting examples is known as the human shadow etched in stone. It's the outline of a person who'd been sitting on the steps outside the Sumitomo Bank when the bomb went off. The heat instantly vaporized them, leaving behind a scorched imprint of their body on the steps. The image was captured in photographs taken later by Japanese and American teams documenting the aftermath. The stone itself was eventually moved to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. People sometimes assume this was a literal burn mark from the body, but it's actually the unbleached area, again, where their body blocked the flash. This photograph shows a hospital ward packed wall to wall with children lying in iron lungs, which were these giant steel machines that kept them alive during the worst of the polio epidemic. In the 40s and 50s, polio was one of the most feared diseases in the world, and it mostly hit young people. It could paralyze muscles, including the diaphragm, meaning you couldn't breathe on your own. So the iron lung worked by creating negative pressure to force your chest to rise and fall. Once you were in, you stayed in. Some patients spent weeks or months inside, others spent their whole lives in one. In the photo, you can see the small round mirrors above the patients' heads, angled so they could look around. That was really their only view of the world. What a complete and utter nightmare, especially if you're claustrophobic. The last man to live in an iron lung was Paul Alexander, who died in 2024. He spent the majority of his life in one, but was actually able to become a lawyer and author, all while confined into this metal tube. In the middle of a civil rights protest at the Manson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida, a group of black and white activists jumped into the motel's segregated swimming pool to protest. What happened next was caught on camera. James Brock, the motel manager, walked over with this jug of muriatic acid, basically industrial strength cleaner, and he started dumping it into the water while people were still swimming. A photographer captured the exact moment he poured the acid, standing over the pool with his jaw clenched. Some of the swimmers scream in panic, unsure of what's happening. At the same time, a white police officer is in the water dragging one of the protesters out by the neck with a billy club. The photo may look staged to some view, but it wasn't. This really happened, and it was broadcast all over the country. Brock later claimed the acid was just to clean the pool, but yeah, it obviously wasn't the case. The image became one of the most graphic examples of how far some were willing to go to keep things segregated. And no, he wasn't charged. On the night of February 24th to the 25th, 1942, Los Angeles went into full panic mode. Just a few months after Pearl Harbor, the US was on edge about a possible Japanese attack. When military spotters thought they saw an unidentified aircraft in the sky, the response was absolute chaos. The city went into blackout, air raid sirens screamed, and the US Army started blasting anti-aircraft rounds into the sky, over 1,400 shells to be exact. But what were they even shooting at? Well, the next morning, the Los Angeles Times published a now famous photo showing searchlights converging on what looked like some sort of solid object in the sky. Some claimed it was a weather balloon, others said it was just mass hysteria. But UFO theorists had another idea, one you can probably guess. Maybe they were shooting at an extraterrestrial craft. The military, of course, downplayed the whole thing though, first saying there was just an enemy plane, then saying there wasn't, then saying it was, a false alarm. But if nothing was there, why did trained military personnel keep firing for nearly an hour? To this day, nobody really knows what they were trying to hit, and that eerie photo keeps the speculation alive. Now, NASA doesn't usually like to admit when it alters images, but this one is hard to ignore. Back in 1976, during the Viking program, NASA's satellites snapped some of the clearest images of Mars yet. But according to some researchers, they also captured something they weren't supposed to, specifically a set of formations that strongly resembled the pyramids of Egypt. These supposed Martian pyramids were found in the Cydonia region, not far from the infamous face on Mars. For years, independent researchers have claimed that some of these pyramid-like structures appeared in early NASA images, but were later edited out, blurred, or conveniently classified. The idea, of course, being that NASA, or the powers controlling it, didn't want people asking too many questions about possible ancient civilizations on Mars. But NASA says there's nothing to see, just a case of pareidolia, our brains making patterns out of random shapes. But the thing is, NASA has confirmed that they do airbrush images when necessary, usually citing clarity issues. So what if the best evidence of artificial structures on Mars was erased before we ever got a chance to see it? Norway's Haltdalen Valley is the UFO hotspot that nobody really talks about, outside of Norway, that is. Starting in 1981 though, strange glowing lights started appearing in the sky, floating, zigzagging, sometimes shooting off at impossible speeds. Unlike most UFO cases, this wasn't a one-time thing either. These lights were consistent, sometimes appearing multiple times a week. And in 1981, one of the most famous photographs was taken, capturing a glowing orb hovering in the sky. The Haltdalen lights have been studied more than most UFO phenomena. Scientists have actually set up monitoring stations to track them, but still, nobody can agree on what they are. Some theories say it's some weird plasma reaction caused by the valley's unique geology, whatever the hell that means. Others think it could be some kind of military experiment. And of course, there's the idea that these are actual alien craft doing whatever it is aliens do. And yes, these lights still show up to this day. Even with all our modern technology though, nobody can fully explain what's going on in Haltdalen, and that 1981 photo remains one of the best pieces of evidence that something unusual is going on up there. In 1919, an old-school Royal Air Force squadron lined up for a group photo at their base. Cute! But when the photo was developed, there was an extra face in the shot, one that shouldn't have been there. Smack in the middle of the back row, there's this guy who wasn't supposed to be there. Was it the janitor? No, it wasn't. This was a man who multiple men in the squadron swore was their old friend, Freddie Jackson. Problem is, Jackson had died just 2 days before this photograph was taken. And on top of that, his funeral had been held on the same day they snapped the picture. The theory is that Jackson, not realizing he was dead, showed up for the photo just like everyone else. Now, some say this is a case of double exposure, which was a common issue in old photography, but that sounds like a lame explanation to me. This is a pretty clear photograph. It's not like Freddy looks like this faint, ghostly figure. There's clearly a dude standing there. So, to this day, nobody's been able to debunk this one entirely. In December of 1964, French photographer Robert Lesseric and his family reported encountering this massive tadpole-like creature in Stonehaven Bay in Hook Island, Australia. Lesseric captured several photographs of this creature, which appeared to be up to 80 feet long. The images are pretty spooky, showing what looks like this dark, elongated thing resting on the seabed. Lesseric claimed that as he approached the creature, it opened its mouth and moved toward him, causing him to make a quick getaway. Now, skeptics have tried to explain this one away, saying the supposed creature could have been a large mass of marine debris, a deflated skyhook balloon, or just an elaborate hoax, but what do you all think? So we're starting off with a photo that was apparently lost for decades, but just resurfaced a few years ago. The Calvine photo, said to be one of the most convincing UFO photographs ever taken. On August 4th of 1990, two men who were working as chefs in a hotel in the Scottish Highlands decided to go for a walk that summer evening in the hills near Calvine. And in the middle of their hike, they spotted something in the sky, this big diamond-shaped object hovering up there. Apparently it made little to no noise as well. They managed to snap this picture here. The hikers sent the image to the paper, but instead of printing it, the newspaper handed it over to the British Ministry of Defence, and they kept it under wraps until 2022, when British journalist David Clarke finally brought it back into the light. After digging for 13 years, Clarke, who teaches at Sheffield Hallam University, discovered that a former Royal Air Force press officer, Craig Lindsay, had a copy of the photo all along, waiting for someone to ask about it. Clarke also had his colleague Andrew Robinson, a photography expert, examine the photo. Robinson found no evidence of tampering or manipulation. So, is this flying object of extraterrestrial origin? Well, Clarke believes it is a genuine UFO, just maybe not an alien aircraft. He thinks it could be the rumored Aurora, a super secret spy plane supposedly built by the US in the 80s.
Next up on our list today, we have a series of photographs of real-life aliens found in 2017 in Peru near the pre-Columbian Nazca lines. Analysis done on the body of the aliens, named Clara and Mauricio, showed that they are at least 1,000 years old and that their genetic makeup is not of this world. Although the findings are controversial, that's to be expected, and widely disputed, also expected, many people believe that Clara and Mauricio are modern civilization's first look at real-life humanoid alien bodies, and they see the discovery as a major scientific advancement in relation to our understanding of extraterrestrial beings. The lead researcher on the case said that the bodies, with 3 fingers on each hand and elongated heads, were found with another, going by the name of Victoria, which was used to conduct the tests that determined the age of the bodies and the genetic material. In the report, lead researcher Musan also stated that Victoria had been carrying eggs inside of her, meaning that it was likely these creatures were able to reproduce offspring and that Victoria was getting ready to when she died. Whether or not the whole thing is a big elaborate hoax remains to be seen. However, despite harsh criticism coming from Musan's peers and the scientific community as a whole, he continues to maintain the validity of his findings, making this kind of believable.
Take a look at these wild photos. These are some genuinely unsettling images right here. There's a lot of mystery behind these pictures. There's still no definitive explanation for them. All we know is that the photos surfaced about 10 years back. Supposedly, they were taken from a US submarine traveling between Iceland and islands near Norway. Alex Mistretta, a paranormal investigator, started looking into these pictures after they popped up in a French magazine called Top Secret, following a supposed leak. The photos were allegedly snapped in March of 1971 through the submarine USS Trepang's periscope during a regular military and science mission. A guy named John Kalika first spotted the UFOs through the periscope. We don't know who actually took the images. The pics were shared to the public by Alex after he saw them in that magazine, and there were some curious notes on the back of one of the photos. It said official photograph, not to be released, CT, and another note that read unauthorized disclosure subject, security certificate SSN 674, criminal sanction. I don't know, what do you guys think of these? Genuine, hoax? I mean, some of these images are pretty insane. I mean, if they weren't doctored in any way.
Next on our list today, we have the McMinnville UFO photographs taken in none other than Sheridan, Oregon, approximately 9 miles southwest of McMinnville by a local farming couple, Paul and Evelyn Trent. On May 11th of 1950, the pair spotted these strange objects in the sky and rushed to grab their camera. They then captured some of the most captivating UFO images to date. It was Evelyn who first noticed the alleged spacecraft hovering in the sky above the farm. She yelled for her husband Paul, who also confirmed the sighting and was the one to capture the images. Paul's father also claimed to have caught a glimpse of the object before it sped off into the sky. Don't know why I did that. A third-party analysis confirmed that the photographs were not doctored and that they showed a real physical object in the sky above the Trent family farm, and that the object was sitting at a significant distance from the lens of the camera. So basically, it was proven that it wasn't just some kind of bug flying nearby the lens. Whether or not you believe in aliens, UFOs, or UAPs, you gotta admit these images are pretty cool.
In 2023, the Pentagon released footage that was taken in the Middle East the previous year. The footage was captured on July 12th, 2022 with an MQ-9 Reaper drone. They're still not sure what this object is. The mysterious orb footage was shown to a congressional committee as part of a defense update on UFOs or UAPs. We can clearly see a small round object that looks like it's shimmering as it flies over houses and empty fields. Sean Kirkpatrick, who heads the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the AARO, mentioned that this footage is pretty much all the info they have on this thing. They don't know where it came from or what its purpose was. The Pentagon also disclosed that they were looking into over 650 incidents involving UFOs.
Next up, if we are going to do a video about real alien photos, I feel it's only right to include a photograph of the most famous UFO sighting and interaction to date, the Battle of Los Angeles, or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, which took place on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was directed to go under blackout by the US military. After all the lights on the ground turned off, the sky above LA was suddenly lit up by a large handful of strange, unidentified flying objects. The military then opened fired into the sky, and the public watched in utter shock as 1,400 rounds of ammunition fired at the airborne, seemingly extraterrestrial objects appeared to have no effect whatsoever. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. 5 civilians died after being hit by materials that appeared to have ricocheted off of the intended targets. 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more died of heart attacks due to the stress of the event, which was 2 hours long in total. If this isn't legit, I don't know what is. That's pretty crazy. Next, we have another case of Chinese government censorship, but unfortunately, unlike the last one, which was actually pretty funny, this one really isn't, as it involves the deaths of many Chinese civilians during a student-led protest in 1989. 35 years ago, across China, many civilians joined together to call for a political reform within the Chinese government that would give more freedoms to the citizens of the country, lower inflation, and overall provide a higher quality of life. While the official number is highly debated, it is estimated that several hundred to several thousand people died in the square on June 4th of 1989 when the government flooded the streets with soldiers and tanks in an attempt to silence protesters. During this sad scene, one man really stood out, known only as Tankman. He stood in front of a line of tanks blocking their way down the Chang'an Avenue in Beijing. The capture of this image later became a symbol of endurance for the Chinese people. Of course, the event was not a proud moment in Chinese history for either the citizens, filled with hope and passion and met with loss and destruction, or the government, who in their vanity ended countless lives and created animosity amongst its people. Every year on the anniversary, the Chinese government does its best to suppress the image in an attempt to keep the Chinese people from reflecting too hard on the dark day in history. Starting off our top 3, we have Putin in drag. That's right, a circulating image of Putin edited to look as though he is wearing drag makeup, as well as any others that might pop up, have been banned by the Russian government. The image that started it all, which really reminds me of like an Andy Warhol pop art kind of thing, was created by an unknown artist in protest after the anti-gay propaganda law was enacted in Russia, which forbid homosexual acts or discussion in any place where children were present. While the image is, of course, easily available to those of you watching this video, it can still be found in Russia as well, just with a little bit of digging. If you are caught with the image, however, you could receive up to 15 days in a Russian prison or a fine of 3,000 rubles, which at the time the law was put into place was equal to around $53 US. Okay, I am thinking this next one trumps the rest. Well, no, actually, I mean Trump should take a rest from spilling government secrets. I don't know why, but this one actually made me laugh because just reading the headline made me feel like I was being punked. Trump tweets sensitive surveillance images of Iran obtained from a spy satellite. What is going on in the House of Commons? I know that's a Canadian thing, but really. So the image Trump tweeted was of the fallout from a failed Iranian missile launch, and it was taken from a secret spy satellite that no one except officials with incredibly high clearance is supposed to even know about. At first, people wondered if the image had been taken by a drone, since it was so incredibly clear with lots of discernible detail, but aerospace experts quickly determined that it was in fact taken by a satellite. Not only that, but based on the image alone, experts were also able to trace exactly which satellite the image came from. I don't know. It's too much for me. Alright, and to finish us off today, we have another good laugh, as the Thai king, whose name I am scared to even attempt to pronounce, but I will place it somewhere here, has banned all unflattering photos of himself. Now you might think that means that if a person were to capture him mid-yawn or sneeze, they would have to delete the image, in which the king looks a little bit silly and perhaps slightly less than regal. Well, you'd be wrong again, my friends, because this king likes to party. Not only that, but he likes to cover himself in temporary tattoos and party all night long, which usually ends up in the disheveled king dressed in nothing but jeans and a very small crop top or sports bra, heading home in his town car the morning after. Now, for the people of Germany, which is where the Thai king spends most of his time, this is not an uncommon thing to see. But for the people of Thailand, any photos of the king's escapades are censored and banned from being shared with any members of the public. Roberta Louise Gibb, better known as Bobby Gibb, seen here without a number after completing the Boston Marathon, was the first ever woman to run the entirety of the Boston Marathon in 1966. Prior to Bobby's participation in the event, the longest amateur athletic union sanctioned race for women was only 1.5 miles, and even after Bobby's unofficial run, the Boston Marathon didn't open up a women's division for the race until 1972, 6 years after Bobby became the pre-sanctioned era women's winner in 1966. Prior to becoming the first woman to participate in the race, albeit unofficially, Bobby trained for 2 years, covering as much as 40 miles per day. Prior to the race, she had actually requested to join as an official participant, but her request was denied due to the fact that, according to the race director, Will Cloney, women were not physiologically capable of running marathon distances. On the day of the race, Bobby donned her brother's Bermuda shorts and a large hoodie and waited until about half the runners were on their way before joining in. Partway through the race, moved by the support of her fellow runners, she removed her hoodie and revealed herself as a woman. When she reached the end of the race, 3 hours, 21 minutes, and 40 seconds after her start time, the governor of Massachusetts, John Vlope, was waiting to shake her hand.
Pictured here is a woman named Ina Squire Brown. She was a professional dancer and, as you can clearly see, soon to be married. Her fiance was Royal Air Force Officer J.C. Martin. What's incredible about this image is when and where it was taken. November 5th, 1940 in London. The photo was colorized a couple years back. All that rubble you see on the lawn, that was part of her home, which had just recently been bombed. And the craziest part was that the bombing had been going on for months and would continue on for months. On September 7th of 1940, the Germans began dropping bombs on English towns and cities in what was referred to as a blitzkrieg, which translates to lightning war. And for 57 consecutive nights, the bombs continued to fall. London was hit the hardest, but this was happening all over the country. So this photo was taken in the midst of all that. An image that perfectly captures the strength and perseverance of the greatest generation. Despite the chaos, the uncertainty, their home crumbling around them, and by that I mean their city and by extension the entire country, Ina Squire Brown, pictured here with her father and neighbor, had smiles on their faces and were going on about their lives. They kept calm and carried on.
In 1921, Elizabeth L. Gardner, pictured here in the pilot seat of a Martin B-26 Marauder, became one of the first American female pilots to serve in a world war. She had been trained by Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tibbets, who later went on to command the B-29 aircraft that dropped the first atom bomb on Hiroshima. During her time as an active member of the Air Force, Gardner flew many medium-sized bomber planes, as well as aircrafts that towed aerial targets. In 1939, the WASP organization was formed, WASP being an abbreviation for Women Air Force Service Pilots, after a woman named Jackie Cochran wrote to the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, suggesting the idea of using female pilots in non-combat missions. Gardner joined the organization, which eventually disbanded in 1944. In 2009, after Gardner's many years of service, she and the remaining living members of the WASP organization were recognized with the Congressional Gold Medal for their service, one of the oldest and highest civilian awards given out in the United States.
This photograph was also snapped in the midst of the London Blitz of 1940, a milkman walking through mounds of rubble to carry out his deliveries. War or not, people still needed their milk. This one was taken by a photographer named Fred Morley on October 9th, just a month after the attacks began. Now, although this photo was genuinely taken at the time, right after a bombing the previous night, it is somewhat staged. See, the Ministry of War wanted to keep everyone's morale high, which was not an easy task given that the Germans were destroying people's homes on a nightly basis. So photographs of the destruction were often censored or just kept out of newspapers altogether. Photographer Fred Morley was frustrated by this. Not only did he feel the need to document what was going on, but he felt that people deserved to see what was truly happening as well. So he compromised. Morley grabbed his assistant, dressed him up as a milkman, and had some firemen who were working on bridges nearby pose in the background, and then snapped this now iconic photo. It showed the destruction left in the wake of the previous night's attack, while also sending an uplifting message to the people of England that they weren't going to let the war break them.
If you are currently using a friction heater, aka a radiator, or if you ever have, Charles S.L. Baker, pictured here demonstrating his radiator system in 1906 next to his unnamed assistant, is the man whom you should send your thank you notes. Born into slavery on August 3rd of 1859, at the age of 15, Baker began working as an assistant to his father, who was an express agent at the time. It was then that Baker developed his interest in the mechanical sciences. He spent decades perfecting his invention, experimenting with different forms of friction using bricks and various types of metal, and after 23 years, he did it. Charles S.L. Baker invented the first ever friction heating device known to man in the form of two metal cylinders stacked one inside of the other with a spinning wooden core in the center to produce the friction, and subsequently heat. After his success, Baker went on to start a manufacturing business for his heating device, the Friction Heat and Boiler Company, which was established in 1904. His company raised $136,000 in capital, equal to almost $5 million today. Baker went on to marry, and his wife eventually gave birth to a daughter named Lulu Bell Baker. When Charles died on May 5th of 1926, he had revolutionized the scientific industry and had changed the way people view the possibilities of simple friction forever.
Next up, we have some mysterious UFO footage that was taken in Wales. So in September of 2016, a police helicopter flying over the Bristol Channel in Wales around 9 p.m. spotted something in the sky. It was only visible on the chopper's thermal camera, cruising at about 106 miles per hour against the wind. Former cop Gary Haseline later released the full video footage, urging the UK government to come forward with whatever they knew about UFOs. Of course, they didn't. Police thought it could have been a drone at first, but the object was moving pretty fast. Faster than any known models at the time. Apparently the thing was picked up by local air traffic control and emitted heat. Haseline stated, "This is verified police helicopter FLIR footage showing an object not seen with the naked eye but clearly seen in the infrared spectrum. It is moving against the wind, so it is not a balloon, nor is it emitting any heat signature indicating a propulsion system."
Next up, we have a photograph taken on May 1st of 1952 at 7:58 a.m. by George Adamski, who claims to have seen multiple UFOs flying over his backyard in Mount Palomar during the 1940s all the way through to the 1960s. Although many renowned UFO experts have been unable to back his claims, Adamski maintains firm in his belief that he was able to capture not only this image of a cigar-shaped mothership flying in front of the moon seen here, but also the image of 6 unidentified flying objects he believes to be alien spacecrafts arising from the moon and flying in formation, which you can now see here. These images gained such notoriety in their time that for a while a rendering of the 6 spacecraft photograph was featured in a postage stamp in Grenada in 1978. Not only did Adamski claim to have taken a number of other images, which were unfortunately destroyed, he also claimed to have communicated with the aliens aboard these ships using symbols, hand gestures, and even telepathy. Whether or not he's telling the truth, I personally believe he would make a hell of an entertaining dinner guest.
This footage was captured in 2004 by Mexican Air Force pilots. They'd been on a routine flight when they spotted several glowing objects on their infrared cameras. They couldn't actually see the objects with the naked eye. There were 13 of these objects in total, flying over the skies of southern Campeche state. This is a solid piece of footage right here. At one point we get a nice long look at the glowing objects flying in perfect formation across the sky, and yeah, I don't know what they are. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but the pilots also had no idea what they were picking up and tried to pursue the objects, but they just lost track of them. They flew away at incredible speed. The footage wasn't released until 2010, and ever since, it's been cited as one of the most convincing examples of a genuine piece of UFO footage.
And finally, we have some more video footage coming to us straight from the declassifieds. I'm talking about UFO documents released to the public by the Pentagon after so many years of adamantly denying the existence of such phenomena. On January 15th of 2023, cameras were set up to survey an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft when all of a sudden, an unidentified aerial presence was captured on that same video, moving at speeds unreachable by any kind of modern-day aircraft. It was shocking to say the least, but it actually gets crazier. The object was moving so fast that it appeared to actually disrupt the atmosphere surrounding the craft, leaving behind an atmospheric wake in lieu of a jet stream as it disappeared completely into the sky. It sounds pretty unbelievable, but as I said, the footage was literally released by the Pentagon, who have done a complete 180 on their denial of UFOs and have now actually asked the public to come forward and submit any authentic images or encounters with UFOs or UAPs to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the ADARO. The first image is a screen grab from a video filmed by a US Marine officer on the 20th of April in 2021 on a military base in 29 Palms, California. After the release of the photograph, multiple Marines came forward to confirm the existence of an aircraft, saying that while the photo showcases only the triangle-shaped formation of bright lights, in person the men were able to make out the black body of the aircraft as well. The unidentified flying object is said to have hovered for 10 minutes in the air before it suddenly vanished without any trace. The men were able to rule out flares for being the cause of the mysterious lights, but were never able to figure out exactly what they saw that night. However, it appears appears the footage has not been taken lightly, as the Pentagon has started an investigation into just what exactly was seen on the night of April 20th of 2021 in the skies above the 29 Palms military base. Next up, we have a series of photographs taken by cosmonaut Ivan Vanger in August of 2020 whilst aboard the International Space Station that appears to depict 5 unidentified flying objects flying at the same speed while maintaining the same distance between each other as well as their surroundings, moving in a straight line just above the Earth's curved horizon visible in the night sky. Vangar, both surprised and curious, took to Twitter, now named X, to share the footage in hopes of getting some clarity as to exactly what he was looking at. In an exciting unfolding of events, his tweet was picked up by the Russian space agency Roscosmos, and a spokesperson revealed that experts were in fact studying the video in an attempt to determine what exactly Vangar had managed to capture. Did you guys know that Japan was a major hotbed for UFO activity? Because I didn't. But apparently the Pentagon does? In fact, UFO sightings are so common in Japan that its military has reportedly ordered all pilots to disclose any and all identified flying objects directly to the Japanese government. Not only that, but Japanese self-defense forces have also undergone extensive training in relation to UFO sighting protocol. To date, 6 alleged encounters between pilots and UFOs have been reported to the Japanese government, one of which was recorded, and depicts 10 white circular balls flying through the skies of Osaka in Japan. While the government has yet to publicly comment on any of the incidents, the update of self-defense protocol alone is pretty telling. The next image was shared by a pretty reputable source, National Geographic. The image was captured by Sergio Loaiza on September 4th of 1971 during an aerial survey of Lake Cote. Everything seemed pretty normal until the photos were taken back to Loaiza's development lab, where he noticed something very strange. A metallic flying aircraft, estimated to have a diameter of 160 feet, was located in the corner of one of the photographs. When he presented the photos to his superiors at the National Geographic Institute, they shut him down quick, forbidding Sergio as well as his colleagues from sharing any information of what they had seen that day. In 1979, however, the photograph was leaked, and the object that appeared in the image was officially classified as an unidentified flying object. In 2021, the existence of the object was again confirmed after the original copy of the photograph was scanned, and it was revealed that the UFO's presence was more than just a scratch on the lens or a piece of dust in the wind. So what do you think it was? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we have footage that comes to us straight from the declassifieds. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the video that the government quite literally copped to the fact that they have been hiding the existence of UFOs for years? Well, they did, and they came with receipts. On the 15th of January in 2023, while surveilling an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft, an unidentified aerial presence was captured moving at speeds unreachable by any of Earth's modern-day technological advances. Not only this, but as the object whizzed through the field of view of the camera lens, it appeared to leave behind an atmospheric wake before disappearing completely into the sky. Guys, if you have any, please leave your UFO and alien stories in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with any of these kind of things. Next up, we have arguably the most beautiful alien-assuming photograph I have ever seen. The photo was taken in 2004 by a retired Royal Air Force officer while on vacation in Sri Lanka. The site was described as some kind of colorful giant donut in the sky with hues of oranges, pinks, purples, and whites. After its capture, the photograph was turned into the Royal Air Force Flying Dales Base in North Yorkshire in England, where it became a classified document held by the Ministry of Defense. The image has since been declassified, of course, and is now available for public viewing, but there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the photo as well as the photographer, as his identity, along with any other information regarding the incident, is pretty much non-existent. I mean, come on, it's a giant glowing light in the sky. You're really telling me no one else saw this and that there's no other information out there other than the fact that the photo exists? Oh, yeah, and not only that, but it was deemed classified by the British Ministry of Defense, so I'm thinking there's something else going on here.
You're probably thinking this is an AI-generated image, but this is actually a genuine photograph. The photo was captured in 1903. Standing in the middle is a photographer named James Rickleton. On either side of him are the Kashmir Giants. Can't miss him. James Riggleton was a photographer and world traveler in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He set out to explore different cultures and capture their lives through his camera. One of his most fascinating adventures took him to Kashmir, a region in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent. There he met these two men, dubbed the Kashmir Giants. The guy on the left stood at 7'9", the one on the right 7'4". Kind of crazy that a 7'4" guy is being dwarfed by an even larger man. That's just nuts.
Here's a photo of a man with a firm grasp on the importance of space travel, watching the 1968 Apollo 8 space launch with his wife. That rocket's going up. The Apollo rocket, that is. The first ever spacecraft to leave Earth's gravitational sphere, and the first manned mission to reach the moon. Although the crew, made up of 3 astronauts, Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders, didn't actually step foot on the moon, their spacecraft orbited the lunar body 10 times before returning safely back to Earth. The astronauts aboard Apollo 8 were the first to photograph the far side of the moon, pictured here, and the first to witness an Earthrise, which is like a sunrise but with the Earth.
What an apocalyptic image this is. It looks like a dystopian painting, but it isn't. It's a colorized photograph of the ruins of Stalingrad, one of the biggest, most brutal battles in all of World War II. It took place between August of 1942 and February of 1943. The Germans wanted to capture Stalingrad. It was a key industrial city and would give them control over the Volga River. But the Soviets were determined to defend the city at all costs. And defend it they did. The battle raged for months, with both sides suffering huge losses. Soldiers fought in the streets, buildings, factories. Some of the most intense combat happened house to house. The turning point came in November of 1942, when the Soviets launched a massive counterattack encircling the German forces. This operation, called Operation Uranus, trapped the Germans inside the city with no way to escape. The German troops eventually couldn't hold out, and in February of 1943, they surrendered.
I'm pretty positive every one of you watching this video has heard of the Titanic, the unsinkable ship that sank just 4 days after its maiden voyage began, but I bet you haven't seen this photograph. For context, approximately 1,500 people died on April 14th of 1912 after the Titanic struck an iceberg around 2 a.m. and became completely submerged underwater in less than 3 hours. While not a guarantee, those who made it onto the ship's lifeboats did have a higher chance at survival. This photograph shows the Titanic's collapsible lifeboat D, which had been lowered from the port side of the large vessel as it went down. The lifeboat was rescued by the RMS Carpathia, another transatlantic ship, around 7:15 a.m. Ironically, 6 years after rescuing the Titanic survivors after their escape from a sinking ship, the RMS Carpathia would also sink after being struck by a German U-boat.
Oh, mirror selfies, so rarely do they work. This is one of those rare cases. Did people take mirror selfies in the 1920s? Well, this Japanese couple did. This photographer snapped a picture of him and his wife sometime in the 1920s. We don't know the names of these people or the exact date the photo was taken. The only info I could find was that a photographer named Hamish Campbell, who'd been based in Tokyo, came across the photo in 2014 while searching through an abandoned home. On the second floor of the home, Campbell had come across a closet that had once been used as a darkroom. There he found hundreds of negatives, including the image you see here. They were all taken by the man in the picture. Other photographs included his wedding, the day-to-day lives of the family, hangouts with neighbors, and pictures like this here of his pet monkey. Yeah, I think this is just a cute one. Good way to end things off. We're going to start off the list with this image here. This is not one of those niche taxidermy pieces. This is indeed a living two-headed dog, pieced together by a mad scientist. Vladimir Demikov was a scientist from the Soviet Union who did some really questionable stuff back in the 50s. He came up with this strange idea of attaching the head of one dog onto another, creating a two-headed dog. Now why? Well, he wanted to figure out more about organ transplants and see how the body would react to these surgeries. From a pure scientific perspective, what he did was kind of a big deal. It was about pushing the limits of what doctors could do back then. But is it incredibly creepy? and unethical? Absolutely. This sparked a huge ethical debate. Seemed like some bizarre freak show rather than an ethical scientific pursuit, and people got pretty upset about it. Playing around with life like that, creating these weird creatures just for the sake of curiosity, it didn't sit well with a lot of folks, and unsurprisingly, the dogs didn't live very long after these experiments. So while Demikhov's work was kind of groundbreaking, it was also just downright cruel. You know what's downright cruel to us is if you don't subscribe to this channel. I mean, what are you waiting for? It's free. We got awesome videos coming your way on the daily, so don't miss out. Hit that button down below. Next up, we have this image here of Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his team of explorers after finally reaching the South Pole. It had been a long, grueling, treacherous expedition, and they'd arrived only to find out that a Norwegian team of explorers had beaten them to the punch. Not only were these men now exhausted, starving, and frostbitten, but they wouldn't even be remembered as the team to reach the South Pole first. And now they had to make the long return trip back to base camp. You can see how miserable and distraught they all look here, not to mention very unwell. Definitely frostbitten. Tragically, the team would never make it home alive. The weather was harsh, they were already suffering from exhaustion, and they were running out of supplies. The first member of the team to pass was Edgar Evans, who died on February 17th of 1912. Then Lawrence Oates willingly walked out into a blizzard, ending his own life. Scott, along with Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, and Edgar Evans, kept going, but things got worse. A storm ended up trapping them in their tent for 9 whole days, and they couldn't move. They died in the tent, just 11 miles away from where they could get more supplies. This is a photograph taken in 1986 of what were known as the Chernobyl liquidators. See those white stripes, the patterns at the bottom of this photo? That was caused by radiation on the film. The Chernobyl liquidators were a group of people who were called in to clean up the mess after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. Their job was to try and make things safer for dealing with the radioactive contamination. These were regular folks, soldiers, firefighters, and other workers who faced really dangerous conditions to help control the aftermath. These workers had to deal with high levels of radiation, and many of them got sick later on due to exposure. They didn't have fancy gear like we might see today. In fact, there wasn't even enough protective equipment for everyone, so some of them had to construct their own out of leather and lead plates. It was an incredibly tough and risky job, and they faced severe health consequences because of it. Some, of course, even died because of the exposure. Alright, this is a pretty famous photograph in the world of paranormal photography, and for good reason. This picture has a pretty chilling tale behind it. It's a very classic kind of ghost story. Back in 1924, during a routine voyage, tragedy struck the SS Watertown when 2 crew members, James Courtney and Michael Meehan, lost their lives and were buried at sea. 2 men had been sent to the ship's interior cofferdam to clean and do repairs, but they were unaware there was poisonous gas leaking into the area they were working in, and they died inhaling the fumes. What followed was this series of events that would go down in maritime history as one of the eeriest tales ever told by seafarers. After the burial, the remaining crew reported an unsettling sight. They claimed to see ghostly faces appearing in the water alongside the ship, and the faces looked just like Courtney and Meehan. One crew member managed to snap the famous photo that is now infamous, seemingly revealing their ghostly faces in the water. Alright, want to see part of the underground hideout of a Russian doomsday cult? Well, you're looking at it. This is one of those images you can kind of smell just by looking at. Never a good thing. Pyotr Kuznetsov led a strange group called the True Russian Orthodox Church, and in 2007 he convinced his followers to barricade themselves inside a cave. Kuznetsov wasn't with them because police had him in custody. He claimed to be a prophet, combining Christian teachings with visions of the world ending. So why did they hide in a cave? Well, they genuinely thought the world was about to end, and by shutting themselves away, they believed they could shield themselves from the apocalypse. The police found out where the cave was, but the people inside threatened to harm themselves if the police tried to step in, and after a few months, yes, months, spent in that cave, the Russian security forces finally stepped in. 2 members had actually already died in the cave and were creating dangerous fumes for the folks that were still alive. Awful. Eventually, though, they were hauled out of there. Does this look like a place you'd want to spend the night in? Probably not. It's run down, clearly abandoned. It'd probably be squatters, and there's no furniture. But even worse than all of that, this is said to be one of the most haunted places in Italy. In the quiet village of Cona stands an abandoned house known as Villa Magnoni, left vacant and untouched now for many years. Its windows, aside from one, are completely sealed up. Back in the late 80s, a group of curious young men decided to venture into this abandoned mansion. They actually managed to break in, but once inside, they heard something. It was the distant sound of children singing, at least that's what it sounded like, and it was seemingly coming from the garden. They went outside to investigate, but when they got there, it was completely empty. As they were looking around, an old woman suddenly appeared in the window above them in the house. She scolded and insulted them, demanding they leave the premises immediately. The teenagers did the smart thing and hastily booked it out of there, but just after they'd hopped into their car and began peeling off, they got into an accident. 3 of them ended up losing their lives in the crash, leaving only 1 survivor. In the aftermath, the villagers took the precautions and sealed off all the windows of Villa Magnoni, believing someone or something dark was lingering inside the property. Weeks later, they discovered that the covering on one specific window, the very one where the old woman had appeared to scold and curse the boys, was mysteriously uncovered.
Okay, I bet you didn't know that another major hotbed for extraterrestrial, UFO, and unidentified aerial phenomenon activity was Brazil. I mean, I did, but maybe you didn't. In fact, this kind of thing is so popular in Brazil that they have an annual day of recognition for these sightings known as the Night of the UFO, which came to be after a major event took place in 1986. On the night of May 19th, a series of unidentified flying objects were seen in the skies of Brazil, and even more non-visual objects were detected via radar across the skies of 4 Brazilian states. Of course, at this time, any and all knowledge the government had on the event was extremely classified. In May of 2012, however, Brazil's Freedom of Information Act went into place, after which the public demanded the release of all the documents relating to the incident. The government complied, and not only released written documents of the events, but also a series of photographs depicting strange activity within the skies above Brazil. Although the images of what appeared to be nothing more than squiggles and clouds of smoke didn't provide much clarity, a statement made by the Minister of Aeronautics did. He said, "This command is of the opinion that the phenomena are solid and reflect, in a certain way, intelligence, due to the ability to follow and maintain a distance from observers, as well as to fly information." After this statement was made, the Brazilian government has still not been able to confirm exactly what took place the day the Night of the UFOs was born. Next, we have a photo taken in 1990 by 2 Scottish chefs who were working in a hotel near the area in which the photograph was taken. After a long day of work, it appears the 2 men had decided to take a hike in an attempt to blow off some steam. While this walk wouldn't end up being incredibly relaxing, it would be wildly exciting, as not long after the 2 men had set off on their journey along the Calvine Scottish countryside, they noticed something hovering above them in the sky. The object was not one that either of the men could identify, and so they pulled out their cameras in an attempt to document the 100-foot flying aircraft instead. The photos, which have been analyzed and show no signs of manipulation, captured the object being circled by a jet plane. They thought the incident was incredibly strange and even newsworthy, so the 2 turned the footage over to the local newspaper for publication, but the images were seized by the British Ministry of Defence and were never released. Until 32 years later, that is, by David Clark, who, unbeknownst to the ministry, had kept a photocopy of one of the original images. The identity of the 2 men was never revealed, nor did they ever come forward to share their story after the images had been seized by the ministry, begging the question of what exactly they saw and what exactly the government was trying to cover up. A photograph taken of an unidentified aircraft lit up by military spotlights in Los Angeles, California, is next on the list. The photograph, which documents an event so big it later became referred to as the Battle of Los Angeles, Angeles or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid was taken on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was under blackout, as directed by the US military. While the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above had been lit up by a myriad of strange objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers stood absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition appeared to have no effect on the unidentified flying object. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. Furthermore, 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. And finally, we have a handful of screen grabs from a video taken by Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich whilst flying an 18F Super Hornet fighter jet over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego during a training mission for the United States Navy. The footage, taken in November of 2004, was captured after Dietrich was asked to investigate a suspicious object that had been seen dropping from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean and then vanishing. When Alex and their colleague arrived on the scene, the ocean's surface, where the object had been reported, appeared as though it was boiling. Moments after arriving to investigate, a strange, elongated white object came into view and was captured on video hovering above the water before it disappeared into the sky at an impossible speed, leaving no wake in the oceans below. While the footage has been confirmed to be authentic by the United States Department of Defense, the object itself, along with its origins, remains a mystery. Starting us off today, we have the location of the Maid of Harlech, a Lockheed P-38F Lightning long-range fighter jet whose whereabouts is strictly prohibited from being documented publicly, by a photograph or otherwise. The jet, which was operated during the Second World War, was an incredibly effective weapons craft, night fighter, and observational aircraft. The plane eventually ended up somewhere along the 4-mile Harlech Beach as a result of none other than human error. You see, the pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert F. Elliott of the US military, had taken off using the aircraft's reserve fuel tanks. Not an uncommon practice, but it seems he had forgotten to switch back to the main reserve as 55 minutes into the flight, the left engine lost power. Thinking there was an issue with the engine, Elliott decided to make his way back to the airfield, but before he could, the right engine died too. Elliott made an emergency landing along the shores of the British beach where luckily no one was injured, and the plane was eventually claimed by the sand. It wasn't until 65 years later in 2007 that the craft was discovered by a civilian. While many locals are aware of the plane's exact location, the distribution of such information is prohibited by the UK government due to its protected status, which was awarded in an attempt to preserve the wreck as well as the wreck site. Next up, we have images of Winnie the Pooh, which became censored in 2017 in China. While China does have a rich history of censorship in which the ban of Gmail, Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as Twitter, now X, are included, no one could have predicted the addition of our honey-loving childhood friend to the list. Images of the funny orange bear became censored after a resemblance was noted between the character and the Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping. The government found the comparison to be a disrespectful mockery of their country's leader and consequently ordered all images of Winnie the Pooh to be blocked from all available search engines, limited as they may be. Next up, we have a series of photos taken during the Great Depression that were banned from being publicly released at the time due to the, well, depressing nature of the content. The photographs were taken by Dorothea Lange, Walker Evans, and a number of their colleagues in an attempt to showcase resilient faces in contrast to the backgrounds of ruin in the United States during the depths of the Great Depression. When the photos were presented to the Farm Security Administration, they were not only rejected, but in an attempt to keep them from being published, were hole punched generally directly through the focal point of the image in the hopes of making them unprintable. Ironically, all this did was garner the images that much more fame and recognition, as when they were eventually released, they not only stood for the people's resilience against the economic collapse, but also freedom of the press. Next up, we have America's hidden bunker, Mount Pony. The 400-foot-long, 140,000-square-foot bunker made with 1-foot-thick steel-reinforced concrete was built in 1969 and was a self-sustaining, fully equipped, radiation-hardened facility designed originally as a safe haven to house up to 540 people for up to 30 days in the case of a nuclear attack. However, in 1988, the bunker became much more, as it was used to store several $billion of federal funds that would be used to replenish US currency and restart the economy in an event of a nuclear attack. The money was stored in the bunker for just shy of 10 years until it was relocated in 1997. Understandably, it was incredibly important at the time that any imagery of the bunker's location, layout, and security functions not be released to the public, as it would diminish the secure nature of the underground safe house and holding facility. At our halfway point, we have a series of photographs taken at a United States nuclear power plant depicting the dangerous conditions in which the country stores its nuclear energy, as well as what the plant workers have to endure. A report released by CNN in 2016 showcases the facility in its decrepit state. After the photographs surfaced, nuclear officials used them as an opportunity to request Congress back the administration's push to modernize the facility. Officials also argued that the state of the facility was actually a threat to United States national security goals, and said that many critical utility, safety, and support systems had been failing at a dangerous rate, due largely to the fact that the majority of key nuclear facilities in the US were built during World War II with the intention of operating for just 10 to 15 years, and have therefore outlived their safe operational lifespan. It seems as though the warnings and pleadings of the nuclear officials have gone unheeded and unheard, as the plants depicted in the photographs appear to have undergone no repairs and presumably just continue to deteriorate. No wonder the government didn't want anyone seeing those photos. It's terrifying, and they're not doing anything about it. Alright, next up we have a photograph of leaked Mexican asylum plans delivered to us by none other than the former United States President Donald Trump. Amidst negotiations with Mexico, Trump called a conference to reveal that he had a secret deal, that is. In the interview, when asked if Trump had made an agreement with Mexico to become a safe third country for asylum seekers, he refused to comment on his discussions with the Mexican president, but instead pulled out a folded piece of paper from his coat's breast pocket and said, "That's the agreement that everybody says I don't have." And if you're like most people, you might have assumed that what Trump presented to the reporters was nothing more than a blank sheet of folded paper. Well, you would have assumed wrong, as not only was Trump holding a legitimate government document, but it was legitimately legible, as the sun hit the back of the agreement, illuminating the words printed on the page, which were swiftly captured in a photograph that was enhanced to reveal, long story short, that Mexico was to be considered a safe third country, meaning asylum applicants would be processed in Mexico instead of the United States, and that in order for this to happen, Mexico would have 45 days to reduce migration to the United States.
This is one of the last photos taken of the Apollo 1 crew on the day a deadly fire erupted during a pre-launch test. All 3 astronauts lost their lives. On January 27th of 1967, during a pre-launch test for the Apollo program, the crew of Apollo 1, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee, were conducting a test at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The spacecraft was mounted on its launch vehicle. The purpose of the test was to check the spacecraft's systems and conditions, simulating a launch with external power sources disconnected. During the test, though, the crew encountered an issue. A fire broke out in the pure oxygen environment of the command module's cabin. The fire spread incredibly fast because of the highly flammable materials that were used at the time to construct the spacecraft. This is one of the last known photographs taken of a man named Michael Rockefeller, the son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, who never returned home from an expedition to Dutch New Guinea, now part of Indonesia, in 1961. Michael was on a mission to study the Asmat people, an indigenous tribe known for their unique art and customs, and while on an art collecting expedition along the coast, Michael's boat capsized. He and a fellow explorer, Rene Wassing, tried to swim to the shore, which was about 12 miles away, but Wassing eventually became too exhausted and Michael decided he was going to continue swimming alone, hoping to reach help. But Michael would never be seen again. Now, the famous theory is that the very tribe seen with him in this photograph ate him. Now, although cannibalism was still a bit of a thing in some areas of Asmat at the time, there's not a whole lot of evidence for that. It just makes for a sensational kind of story. There's another possibility that he was attacked by sharks or just succumbed to exhaustion. This is a photograph taken inside Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Kentucky, a hospital that became famous for treating patients suffering from tuberculosis. So yeah, a lot of people died there. It opened in 1910 to treat people with the deadly lung disease. Back then, there wasn't a cure for tuberculosis, so the sanitarium focused on providing fresh air and sunlight, thinking it might help patients get better. As the years went by, better treatments for tuberculosis came along, and the need for places like Waverly Hills decreased. The sanitarium eventually closed in 1961. After that, it went through various uses. It was an old folks' home for a short time. Nothing really stuck though. Now, what makes Waverly Hills famous, or maybe infamous, is its reputation for being very haunted. Over the years, people started to tell stories about strange things happening there. Glowing orbs, the sounds of disembodied coughs, footsteps making their way down the empty halls. One of the most famous stories is about a ghostly figure named Timmy. According to the tale, Timmy was a little boy who stayed at Waverly Hills and died there. People claim to have heard a child's laughter and seen a shadowy figure resembling a young boy. Because of all these stories, Waverly Hills has become pretty popular for ghost hunters. There have even been TV shows and documentaries filmed there. And finally, we have Mayenga Nasaka. Mayenga Nasaka was a nurse in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, during a scary time in 1976, the Ebola outbreak. This photo captures one of the last moments of her life. Mayenga got infected with the Ebola virus while she was working at Mambalat Hospital in Kinshasa. She was caring for a nun who'd been brought in from Yambuku Mission Hospital where the outbreak started. The thing is, Mayenga's case became kind of famous because she was one of the first healthcare workers to get sick during the outbreak. In the picture, you can see her standing next to another nurse taking care of a patient, but here's the heartbreaking part. Just a few days after this photo was taken, Mayenga passed away. Hospital staff didn't have the right gear to protect themselves, and there weren't enough precautions to stop them from coming into contact with patients' blood or fluids. This was the very early stages of the outbreak, and people didn't know how dangerous the virus really was at the time.